Hi, my name is Grant. I'm 35 years old, and if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I'd have told you my life was a blueprint for the classic work hard, play later success story. 6 a.m. alarms, protein shake, 40-minute lift session, then a commute downtown to stare at steel frame calculations until my eyes blurred. I'm the guy who signs off on whether a shopping mall or a hospital wing stays standing when the wind decides to flex. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives me a quiet pride every time I drive past a skyline I helped carve. My wife, Selena, used to brag about that. "See that tower? My husband keeps it from toppling over," she'd chirp to coworkers. Funny how praise can give way to eye rolls when familiarity sinks its teeth in. Quick pit stop, jump into the comments and let me know where you're tuning in from and what time you hit the alarm in the morning. Are you a Dawn Patrol grinder like me or a professional snooze button warrior? I love hearing the range. Back when this story started, Selena and I looked like the polished LinkedIn version of ourselves. She in tailored blazers at a boutique marketing agency, me in rolled-up sleeves hunched over blueprints. We married fresh out of grad school in a courtyard ceremony so small you could have thrown a frisbee over the entire guest list. Kids were eventually. First came careers, a lake blue hatchback for her, a used pickup for me, and a two-bedroom condo perched just close enough to the city that Uber rides didn't sting. Friday nights meant ramen experiments and streaming crime shows while our friends posted nightclub selfies. It was mundane, but at the time, mundane felt secure. Then Jard and Denise entered the picture, and the tempo of our life kicked up half a beat. We met them at one of those charity mixers where the tickets cost more than the open bar is worth, but the photos look LinkedIn worthy. Jard was impossible to miss. 6'2", tan year-round, hair gelled into that breezy, I woke up like this, wave. He introduced himself as a regional sales director for a medical tech firm and made sure everyone caught the title. His handshake lingered a breath too long, the way a magician palms a card. Beside him stood Denise, his high school sweetheart-turned-wife, petite with calm brown eyes that scanned and stored details like a librarian. She and Selena squealed when they realized they'd overlapped in a freshman marketing seminar years earlier. Proximity plus a drop of nostalgia is basically social superglue. By the next week, the four of us were sharing tapas downtown, Jard waving away the wine list like a game show buzzer. They never stock the good vintages, he'd sigh before announcing a bottle I couldn't pronounce. At first, the double dates were harmless fun. Selena loved having a girlfriend who understood agency politics, and I appreciated someone else picking up half the check. But there's a fine line between friendship and orbiting a small star that thinks it's a sun. Jard talked in Instagram captions, crushed the Q2 numbers. Just landed Fiji tickets on points, bro, while Denise flashed supportive smiles. One night he asked how many square feet my firm's latest project was, then nodded sagely before comparing it to his company's warehouse expansions. The comparison made zero sense, but Selena still giggled like he was unveiling trade secrets from NASA. Looking back, I missed the first Fishers because they appeared as life upgrades. Selena swapped her soft wave hair for a next-level exec bob and started hitting a boutique gym where the towels smell like eucalyptus. "Image matters in my field," she said, "and hey, I'm an engineer in a polo shirt. Who was I to judge?" Then came the wardrobe overhaul, the client dinners that ran long, the Sunday meal prep ritual quietly disappearing. Harmless, right? Relationships evolve. But here's a question for you. At what point do small changes stop being growth and start being warnings? Drop your thoughts below. Somebody else in the comments may need that perspective today. One Thursday, I got home at 9, brain fried from revising seismic load calculations, and found Selena Googling co-working spaces near me on the couch. She clicked away the tab like a teenager busted on Facebook. "Just scouting venues for a pitch," she shrugged. I pecked her cheek, tasted red wine, and chalked it up to agency life. Patterns, though, have a funny habit. Ignore them and they tattoo themselves louder. Jard's name threaded our conversations more than my own coworkers. He really understood how to negotiate a raise. Just knew the trend before it hit, had insider ways to maximize rewards points. When he booked a mountain cabin for a couple's weekend, technically his parents' place, but I managed the family trust, he boasted. Selena insisted we clear our calendars. I wanted to beg off. Deadlines don't hit pause for hot tubs. But her disappointment cut deeper than I expected, so I lugged my laptop to the car and told myself fresh air might help me finalize specifications. That getaway is still stored in 4K inside my skull. Jard grilling steaks in monogrammed aprons, Selena laughing as she refilled his glass, Denise curled on a deck chair scrolling quietly. I stepped inside to take a work call, returned 10 minutes later, and caught Jard's hand grazing my wife's elbow in a way that was almost innocent. Almost. Maybe you felt that gut drop, when logic tells you not to overreact but instinct flashes a red light. I buried it. Grown men don't start drama over elbow touches. Another lesson I've learned the hard way: trust your gut early, or you'll end up trusting lawyers later. The months that followed slid downhill so slowly it felt flat. Selena's phone, once abandoned on tables, now lived zipped in her purse, face down, notifications silenced. Anytime I caught a flash of a name, it was Jard. The gym nights stretched from 1 hour to 3. If I asked, she'd sigh, "We're fine, Grant. Stop interrogating me." Meanwhile, Jard's humble brags sharpened into casual digs. Still clocking those 60-hour weeks. "Man, I'd die without freedom." He laughed across our dinner table, polished watch glinting under pendant lights I'd installed myself. Selena swatted his arm. "Stop, Jard," but her smile lingered like she agreed. Let me underline something. Love doesn't collapse all at once. It fractures microscopically, day by day. One evening you realize you're making 2 plates of pasta because she texted, "Client drinks ran late, don't wait up." Another, you notice the notes she used to tuck in your lunch have been replaced by credit card alerts for luxury ride shares. None of it singularly indicts, but together it whispers, "Wake up." The crack that finally reached my ears arrived in the softest form: silence. I was sketching beam reinforcements on the sofa when Selena drifted through the door, heels in hand, and floated a kiss across my forehead. Her perfume, something new, hung in the air after she vanished into the shower, door locked. We used to brush our teeth side by side, arguing over who used more counter space. Now steam and locked doors. I stared at the blueprint glowing on my laptop and realized I knew more about the tensile strength of steel than the state of my marriage. Here's the takeaway I wish someone had delivered to 35-year-old me, and maybe it's the reason you're hearing my voice now. The foundation you ignore will betray you faster than any external force. Buildings don't collapse because a storm passes. They collapse because cracks went untreated. Relationships are no different. If something feels off, measure it, test it, reinforce it. Hopping it fixes itself is like hopping rust turns back into iron. That night I tried. When Selena climbed into bed scrolling her phone, I asked calmly whether she was happy. She blinked, screen reflected in her eyes. "This again? I'm exhausted, Grant." She rolled over, sealing communication like a tomb. The mattress between us felt wider than the Grand Canyon. By now you might be shouting at your screen, "Dude, check her phone," or "Follow her." I get it, but love is stubborn. It writes its own equations about loyalty, the kind no spreadsheet can balance. I chose trust, or maybe I chose denial. Hard to tell the difference in real time. Besides, work raged on. A hospital expansion hit a snag, and I started piling 12-hour days like sandbags against a flood. Grind now, vacation later. That was our plan, remember. And maybe that's the cruel twist. Sometimes the very effort you pour into securing a future is the distance that lets someone else write themselves out of it. 3 weeks after my bedside attempt at honesty, Selena announced another team off-site, this one at a coastal resort 2 hours away. Overnight brainstorming, she called it, flashing the agency's slick invitation on her phone. I noticed the resort logo matched the backdrop of a selfie Jard had posted weeks earlier. My stomach clenched. She misread my expression as envy and kissed my cheek. "I'll bring you back the stupid fluffy robe," she teased, already zipping cosmetics into a travel case. That was the moment, the point on the timeline where suspicion hardened into certainty, whether I admitted it aloud or not. I stood in the doorway watching her pack, every fold of clothing a stitch sealing a secret life. And I heard a voice, my own maybe, ask, "If the beams are this compromised, how long until the roof caves?" Reflection time for anyone still with me. Have you ever sensed something crumbling under the surface but convinced yourself it was fine because fixing it felt too big, too painful, too messy? Tell us below. Your honesty might nudge someone else to run a structural check on their own life. Before Selena's rideshare whisked her toward that beach resort, she hugged me with the familiarity of muscle memory. My arms tightened around a body I suddenly realized I barely knew. I watched taillights disappear and felt a draft where the door closed, a chill that had nothing to do with the thermostat and everything to do with trust evaporating. I didn't know it yet, but a woman I barely spoke to, Denise, was tracing the same cracks from the opposite side of the wall. In a few days our paths would intersect, paperwork would change hands, and the careful life I'd engineered would implode with surgical precision. But in that moment, alone in our tastefully staged living room, I simply pressed my palm to the wall and listened, half expecting the drywall to answer back. That night I fell asleep on the couch, spreadsheets glowing on my laptop until the battery pleaded mercy, and I dreamed of beams bowing under invisible loads, structures failing because somebody somewhere stopped paying attention. When I jolted awake before dawn, I couldn't shake the image. I laced up my gym shoes, stepped into the still dark street, and ran farther than my usual route, chasing the sunrise like it held an answer. It didn't, of course. Answers rarely arrive gift-wrapped. But questions, they multiply with every mile. And as the sky bled pink over the city I'd helped build, one question anchored itself so firmly I almost tripped. If everything you're working for turns out to be a lie, what exactly are you building? That question followed me home, into the shower, into my truck, onto the freeway. It echoed between steel columns and echoed louder in the silence waiting at home each night, until Denise slid a manila envelope across a cafe table and blew my life wide open. The morning everything cracked open started like any other. Fluorescent buzz in the office, coffee still too hot, me squinting at column-load spreadsheets. Then my phone vibrated with a number I barely recognized, Denise. 3 terse words, need to talk. A time, a cafe, and the insistence we speak in person. I read the message twice, felt my pulse hitch, and told my project lead I had a sudden personal matter. If you've ever sensed a tidal wave hiding behind a 6-word text, you know that electric feeling humming in my chest as I walked out. Denise was already in the back corner when I arrived, oversized sunglasses swallowing half her face, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone stone cold. She looked like someone who'd traded sleep for worry. When she pushed the glasses onto her head, the red rims around her eyes said everything. No hello, just a quiet, "I'm sorry, Grant," and a manila folder sliding across the table like a judge's gavel. Inside, hotel invoices stamped with dates that mirrored Selena's, off-sites, blurry parking garage photos of Jard and Selena leaning into kisses, screenshots of messages I couldn't finish without feeling my throat close. They joked about me putting in another heroic all-nighter while they tried room service champagne. One text had Selena saying she couldn't wait to be free of spreadsheets in suburbia. Ironic, I thought, because spreadsheets in suburbia were the scaffolding she asked me to build. I must have stared too long because Denise cleared her throat and added a second packet. Company expense reports, color-coded. Jard had labeled 5-star resorts as client lodging, luxury dinners as product demo meetings, jewelry as relationship-building gifts. Nearly 50 grand diverted during the months of their affair, all signed off by departments that trusted his title more than their instincts. I finally managed, "Why bring this to me?" Her voice steadied. "Because they've been planning to ditch us, and because theft isn't just a broken vow, it's a felony. You deserve the facts before they pull the pin." We let the silence sit, 2 people grieving a shared crime scene. The smell of burnt espresso and pastry sugar should have felt ordinary, but the whole cafe felt warped, as if gravity had shifted by a degree. Here's the first lesson that slammed me in that booth. Truth delivered late is still a gift. It might bruise, but darkness bruises worse. If you've been hiding from proof because you dread the confirmation, ask yourself which pain is heavier, doubt, or the weight of certainty you can finally set down. Denise outlined her plan. File for divorce tomorrow, drop an anonymous tip to Jard's board the moment her lawyer stamped the paperwork. She spent 2 months tracing every penny, lining her ducks so she'd land on her feet. I nodded, feeling oddly light, like reality had at least crystallized, even if it was ugly. We parted with an awkward half-hug, partners not in romance but in survival, and I drove straight, not to the office but to the bank. Somewhere between the cafe and the parking lot, engineer mode kicked in. You can't stop a beam from rusting once it has, but you can shore up the structure before the whole floor pancakes. I opened a new account in my name only, rerouted my paycheck, and transferred every cent that wasn't nailed down, leaving just enough in the joint fund that Selena wouldn't smell smoke. Then I hit the credit card apps, stripped her of authorization where I could, slapped fraud alerts on the rest, and requested real-time notifications for every swipe. If she planned a lover's getaway this weekend, the charges would clang like church bells on my phone. Standing in the vestibule waiting for the banker's printouts, I caught my reflection in the tinted glass. Same charcoal coat, same work badge, but the man looking back felt 10 years older and 5 pounds lighter, hollowed out then refilled with resolve. Funny how a day can age you and sharpen you at the same time. Pause here and tell me, do you monitor the money that flows through your household, or is it their department? No shame, just honesty. Your comment might nudge someone else to double-check a statement tonight. Next stop, a Google search for the fiercest family attorney within a 10-mile radius. Reviews used words like pit bull and surgical. Yes, please, I called. The receptionist said Ms. Jordan had an opening at 4. Perfect. I swung by an ATM for $2,000 in cash, Stormweather Fund, then parked outside her office and breathed cedar-scented air freshener for 15 minutes, rehearsing the story in my head so I wouldn't unravel when it mattered. Ms. Jordan was mid-40s, blazer crisp enough to slice paper, smile polite but unused. I dumped the evidence on her conference table, and she lifted each sheet like a pathologist examining tissue. Adultery alone won't move the needle in this state, she said, tapping the hotel receipts. But misappropriation of marital assets does, and felony fraud will light a bonfire under settlement talks. She laid out the sequence. Gather fresh statements tonight, copy everything digital before Selena could nuke devices, act normal for 48 hours while papers were drafted, then serve her at work, maximum witnesses, minimum theater from my side. Revenge is emotional, she said, but leverage is procedural. We'll stick to leverage. I slid my new debit card across the table and fronted the retainer without blinking. The way I figured, every dollar now was 100 saved later. Walking out, I felt an unexpected sensation. Relief. Not happiness, but the calm that comes from admitting the house is on fire and finally dialing the brigade instead of arguing about smoke detectors. It was dusk when my truck reached Brody's apartment. Brody and I built dorm lofts together senior year. He's the rare friend who never asks for the polished version of things. I texted spare couch. He replied with an address and the code to his building gate, no questions. When I arrived, he wordlessly handed me a cold soda and pointed to a pile of fresh towels, the universal language of stay as long as you need. Real friendship tends to be efficient like that. The first night away from home stung in small, unexpected ways. Muscle memory reached for Selena's side of the bed before remembering it was a fold-out sofa. My phone buzzed with a casual, running late, love you, and the normality of her lie made my stomach clench. I drafted a reply, hope the strategy session pays off, then deleted it. Let her enjoy the quiet before the sirens. Instead, I opened a blank notes app and built an inventory of every shared asset. Condo, investment accounts, the sentimental stuff people forget until it's too late. Wedding photos, the record player we'd saved 3 months for, my grandfather's watch. Protecting the watch felt suddenly vital, like guarding lineage itself. By 2 a.m. the list was complete and my brain still sprinted, so I scrolled the gallery on my phone, Thailand beaches, goofy home renovation selfies, anniversary tiramisu. Each image looked counterfeit now, staged by actors who were secretly rewriting the script backstage. I should have felt pure rage, but what bubbled up was something softer and colder, indifference. When care switches off, it does so with a click, like a breaker tripped. The lights go out all at once. Yet somewhere under that numbness, a fierce resolve flared. If Selena wanted a cleaner, flashier life funded by lies, fine. But she'd do it without my savings or my silence. And if Jard considered fraud just another business strategy, Denise and I would be the line item he never accounted for. The next day blurred into admin warfare. Password resets, 2-factor on every cloud drive, exporting years of emails in case her lawyer tried to play amnesia. I shipped sentimental valuables to a safety deposit box and left the cheap Daker behind like props on a stage about to be gutted. While I copied archives, Selena texted a selfie from the resort balcony, sunset melting behind her. Brainstorm wrapped, wish you were here. The unspoken caption, you have no idea who actually is here. I almost laughed at the brazenness. Instead, I forwarded the photo to Ms. Jordan, time-stamped and geotagged proof for the ledger. Later that afternoon, Denise pinged me. Tip sent. Clock starts now. I pictured an envelope out there in corporate cyberspace landing on some audit team's desktop, the first domino tilting. I met her that evening in a park halfway between our halves of the city, neutral ground. We exchanged updates like covert operatives. My finances barricaded, her divorce filing stamped first thing in the morning. She dressed plainly, hair pulled back, but her eyes carried a spark I hadn't noticed before, a clarity that comes from choosing action over paralysis. Funny, she said, kicking a pebble. Jard always said I was too cautious to survive in sales. Turns out caution is exactly what saves you when recklessness erupts. She offered a small smile. You holding up? I searched for the correct adjective and landed on steadied. The earthquake had hit. Now came reconstruction. We sat on a bench watching joggers loop the pond, and for a minute conversation drifted to normal topics. Her plan to reactivate her accounting license, my department's bid on a new transit hub. Strange how ordinary life flows right alongside the wreckage. Before we parted, Denise handed me a flash drive. "Everything I sent the board," she said, "in case their servers mysteriously malfunction." I thanked her, slid it into my pocket, and realized we were entrusting each other with nuclear codes. Betrayal had become the cement binding two strangers. On the drive back to Brody, I mulled another takeaway worth sharing. Disaster doesn't discriminate, but preparation does. People joke about rainy day funds until the roof literally caves. If you're listening and you share finances with someone, run a fire drill now. Know where the documents live, who's named on what, and how fast you can pivot if trust evaporates. That night I dozed off to the hum of city traffic, paperwork stacked on the coffee table like sandbags against a flood none of my coworkers knew was roaring toward me. Tomorrow, Ms. Jordan would finish the papers. In 48 hours, a process server would stride into Selena's glass-walled office, carrying an envelope thicker than her designer notebook. And somewhere deep in a corporate email queue, an auditor would double, click a suspicious expense report, and wonder why a client lunch included diamond earrings. As sleep finally took me, one thought flickered. Structures fail not because the storm is strong, but because maintenance was ignored. I couldn't rewind the neglect, but I could blueprint the demolition. Controlled, precise, every charge placed so the liar's tower would collapse inward without crushing me on the way down. Tomorrow, we'd start the countdown. The 2 days between signing the retainer and launching the strike felt like living beside a ticking boiler. I smiled at coworkers, sat through design reviews, even sent Selena a good luck, crushed that pitch text to keep up appearances. Pretending calm when every tendon in your neck wants to snap is a bizarre skill. You learn it fast once lawyers tell you a single slip can tip off the target and ruin service. At 1:45 p.m. on D-Day, I parked across from Selena's glass tower, Americano in hand, nerves darting like fish. Ms. Jordan had scheduled the process server for exactly 2 p.m., late enough that lunch coma chatter still filled the open floor, early enough for word to ricochet before quitting time. I watched the lobby clock flick from 1:59 to 2:00 and whispered, "Showtime." A woman in a navy blazer strode inside, envelope underarm. 38 minutes later, my phone erupted, call after call, Selena's name lighting the screen like a strobe. I muted it, eyes fixed on the revolving doors. At 2:40 she appeared, blouse rumpled, mascara streaks carving lines down her cheeks, the envelope clutched like an incriminating diary. She scanned the street, spotted my truck, and barreled toward it. I rolled forward just enough that she had to chase, then merged into traffic, pulse weirdly steady. Part of me expected to feel triumph. What washed over instead was a clean, clinical calm, like I'd set a bone that had been crooked too long. Lesson drop while we're here. Revenge fantasies feel explosive, but real accountability is procedural. Paper beats yelling every time. If you've been tempted to torch someone who hurt you, ask yourself, could documentation do the job with fewer flames? That evening I crashed at Brody. Again, around 8, pounding rattled his door. I opened to find Selena, eyes wild, hair frizzed by wind, still in office heels. "How could you ambush me at work? That's humiliation, Grant." She tried to push past. I blocked the jam, calm as a bouncer. "From now on, speak through counsel." She shifted from outrage to tears in a blink, whispering we could fix this. That jarred was a mistake, that none of it meant the marriage had to end. I reminded her the credit card log said otherwise. The moment I mentioned the expense reports, her face hardened into something I'd never seen, calculating, almost dangerous. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I closed the door on the threat and felt nothing but relief on the other side of the wood. The next morning at work, I found Jard leaning against my pickup, arms folded like a catalog model who'd missed his cue. The audacity almost made me laugh. I set my laptop bag on the hood, stared without speaking. Salesman hates silence. 30 seconds later, he cracked. "Look, man, things got out of hand. Let's be adults." He started talking about marriages drifting, needs not being met, all the cliches that cheat code users recite. Then he added, Selena needed someone to satisfy her. The sentence was slick with contempt. I didn't think, just swung, one clean right hook that popped like a snapped cable. He crumpled hand to cheek, more shocked than hurt. Punch thrown, I regained my engineer rationality. "Worried about the financial allegations?" I asked. His eyes flickered. "Don't make reckless accusations," he growled, straightening his designer lapel. "That road's dangerous." "So is wire fraud," I answered, unlocking my door. When I drove off, he was still rubbing his jaw, calculating angles. A tiny, guilty part of me enjoyed picturing the bruise blooming under those perfect cheekbones. That night, Denise and I met in her kitchen, formerly their kitchen, blueprints of our own kind strewn across the table, spreadsheets, emails, GPS logs from Jard's company car. She'd uncovered patterns dating back 3 years, nearly 200 grand siphoned through client entertainment. He'd been careful until Selena, love or lust, had made him sloppy. "Ready to package this?" she asked. I nodded. We built a timeline, hyperlinked every receipt to a line item, added footnotes for company policy violations, then zipped the dossier with a 20-character password. Denise drafted a short, icy cover letter to the board and CC'd the external auditors for good measure. At midnight, we hit send. If you're listening and wondering whether whistleblowing felt scary, yes. My finger hovered before click. My career, her safety, both could take shrapnel. But there's a deeper fear in letting rot fester. Sometimes the only way out is straight through. Corporate response was faster than Wi-Fi. By lunch next day, Denise's contact texted. Security had escorted Jard out. 2 VPs who rubber-stamped his expenses were placed on leave. Forensic accountants occupied a conference room with files stacked like Jenga towers. Meanwhile, Ms. Jordan filed an emergency motion for asset protection, citing pending criminal investigations. The judge granted it within hours. Selena couldn't touch a penny without dual signatures. Selena's first volley of rage arrived as a monologue on my voicemail. I was destroying her reputation, twisting normal business perks into crimes, conspiring with Denise to steal her life. I forwarded the audio to Ms. Jordan, who filed it under exhibits, intimidation, check. Reflection moment. Have you ever watched someone rewrite reality to avoid accountability? Drop examples below, names optional, because shared stories teach resilience. Over the next week, the dominoes toppled in stereo. My HR rep called to confirm internal rumors. Jard's firm had expanded its probe and contacted federal investigators. Selena's agency, spooked by optics, placed her on administrative leave while they reviewed her judgment in client situations. Translation: they needed distance. Ms. Jordan steamrolled the first settlement conference. Armed with hotel invoices, she argued marital funds financed adultery. Selena's attorney looked like a cornered intern. After the session, he pulled me aside, muttering that cooler heads could save costs. I suggested he advise his client to stop texting threats at 2 a.m. On Friday evening, solving beam-load puzzles felt oddly soothing after days of emotional static, so I stayed late. Walking to the parking lot, I spotted a figure packing beside my truck. Jarred again, dark circles under eyes that once looked airbrushed. "We need a truce," he said, voice shredded. I kept distance. "Company's pressing charges," he continued. "If you withdraw that nonsense, I'll testify Selena coerced me." His desperation hung like exhaust. I shook my head. "Your mess, your consequences." He moved closer, whisper yelling, "Think about Denise. She'll get dragged through trial." I let silence answer. When he realized leverage zeroed out, shoulders sagged. As I pulled away, he yelled something about ruining lives. In the rearview mirror, he looked small, suit rumpled, a king without a castle. Remember this insight if you ever question whether documentation matters. The calmest voice usually owns the files. 2 days later, headlines hit the regional business journal. Regional sales director placed on leave amid fraud probe. They used his corporate headshot, smile wide, future bright, just inches above paragraphs about financial misconduct. I texted the link to Denise with a simple Phase 1, complete. She replied with a gif of dominoes falling and an invitation to dinner. We both needed normal food that didn't come from cardboard cartons. Over pasta, she admitted the morning's adrenaline crash had left her shaky. "You ever feel like dropping the torch because the fire's hotter than expected?" she asked. I did, but dropping it wouldn't extinguish it, only scorch our feet. We toasted to courage by necessity and ended up talking about childhood vacations, ironic office memes, anything but courtrooms. Healing hides in ordinary moments more than cinematic triumphs. When I returned to Brody, Selena had left a handwritten note under the door, flowing script that used to adorn anniversary cards. "Please call me. We're spiraling. I need you." The paper smelled faintly of her perfume, once comforting, now sour. I slid it into a plastic evidence sleeve, habit, and filed it with the rest. Caring and enabling our cousins, I'd severed their relation. By week's end, Ms. Jordan called with news. The judge approved expedited financial discovery. Selena's claims to half of certain investments were frozen pending proof she hadn't helped deplete them. Translation: her bargaining chips were melting. Also, process servers had finally reached Jard with Denise's divorce petition. He dodged for days, but a clerk caught him outside a gym. Denise celebrated by ordering cupcakes for the entire investigative team. Sweet, literal justice. A reflection for you viewers walking beside me. Ever noticed how cheaters count on inertia? They assume you'll value harmony more than truth. What they underestimate is how decisive a quiet person becomes once activated. Share a moment you shifted from passive to proactive. Someone scrolling might need that push. The fallout crescendoed on a Tuesday. Jard was arrested at 7 a.m. Perp walked in loafers without socks, local news filming as agents loaded cartons of seized files into vans. Denise sent me the clip on loop. We watched in stunned silence before bursting into the kind of laughter that releases months of held breath. Later that afternoon, Selena's HR emailed Ms. Jordan. Her position had been terminated. Loss of confidence. My lawyer forwarded it with a one-line comment. Leverage increased by 20%. That night I stood on Brody's balcony, city lights jittering below. For the first time since the cafe meetup, my shoulders dropped a centimeter. The demolition was in motion, each charge detonating exactly where we'd placed it. Funny thing about controlled implosions, to bystanders they look sudden, but the engineer sees the weeks of calculations behind the spectacle. I wasn't naive. Debris still flies after the collapse, hearings, asset splits, the emotional rubble no decree can sort. But watching wrongdoers face the math of their choices reshaped my own definitions. Justice isn't a buzzer-beater dunk, it's a ledger balancing over time. If you've stuck with me this far, here's your turn. Think of one unresolved hurt you're carrying. What single step, documentation, conversation, boundary, could move you from simmering to solving? Drop it below, maybe writing it is your first detonation chord. As I closed the balcony door, my phone chimed one last time. Denise, they just impounded Jard's car. Audit expanding to executive level. I replied with a simple thumbs up, then caught my reflection in the glass. No revenge glow, no gloating smirk, just tired eyes and a half-smile that said, on to rebuilding. The takedown was nearly complete. Next came the aftermath nobody expects. The quiet space where something new might actually grow. 5 months after the morning sirens hauled Jard away, I was sitting in the same courthouse hallway where our marriages had started to crumble. Sunlight striped the floor through tall windows, dust motes drifting like lazy snow. This time there was no earthquake of nerves, just the slow exhale of a man finishing a marathon he never wanted to run. Selena arrived in a blazer that used to scream rising star, but now looked like a costume 2 sizes too big. She glanced at me once, eyes hollow, then found a seat at the far end beside her attorney. No tearful please talk to me today. The fight had drained out along with her credit limits. Inside, the judge flipped through the settlement with the briskness of someone editing boilerplate. My lawyer did most of the talking. We agreed on a simple division. I kept the condo, retirement, and investments. She kept her car, personal belongings, and a modest cash chunk to restart. It wasn't about punishing her anymore. Life had already done a thorough job. When the judge asked if we both accepted, Selena's voice came out as a rasp. Yes, Your Honor. One wooden gavel tap, and 6 years of paperwork and promises became official history. Walking out, I held the door as she exited, habit more than grace. She paused, pulled in a breath as if to speak, but the words died. In that empty second, I saw the version of us that might have been. Kids in the backseat, barbecue Sundays, arguments over paint colors instead of evidence folders. Then the image flickered out. She turned, heels echoing down marble, and I felt only relief, not triumph or spite, just the lightness of setting down a stone I'd carried too long. Outside, Denise leaned against the railing, wind tugging loose strands from her ponytail. She finalized her own divorce the week before, house, cars, and a tidy settlement wired to an account only she controlled. "How'd it go?" she asked. I mimed a gavel strike. She smiled, a soft, private smile that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with starting line tape snapping underfoot. We celebrated the way you celebrate surviving a storm, quiet coffee at a corner bakery, steam fogging the window while the city hurried past oblivious. Later that day, I returned to a job site where a new transit hub was pushing steel skeletons against the skyline. Watching cranes hoist beams into place always steadies me. I traced my fingers over the weld seams, feeling the hum of generators and shouted measurements. Structures rise because every piece has purpose and every joint is inspected. Skip one torque test, and a decade later the fault echoes. If marriage had inspectors, maybe Selena and I would have caught the hairline cracks before they spidered. But then again, maybe not. Denial isn't a design flaw, it's human nature. 2 weeks after the decree, a curious calm settled. No late-night ping from lawyers, no dread scroll through bank apps. Evenings filled themselves with things I'd forgotten I loved. Cooking a meal that didn't come from a microwave, sketching bridges in a notebook, running just because the sky was rosy and the pavement called. Denise and I texted occasionally, updates on Jard's case, random memes, a photo of her new office sign going up. Foresight Forensics, we follow the money. I drove by one night after work. The logo shone in fresh acrylic, and pride surprised me, like watching a friend cross a finish line. Then came the invitation. Denise suggested lunch at a riverside food truck park, neutral ground where divorce papers and fraud talk felt out of place among picnic benches and salsa music. We ordered tacos, ended up sharing churros, and nearly forgot to mention our ex-spouses at all. Conversation drifted to childhood science fairs, worst bosses, best road trip songs. Mid-bite she laughed at something dumb I'd said, head tilted back, sunlight catching her eyes, and I realized the laugh felt unfamiliar because I hadn't heard the real thing before, only the restrained, public version she wore around Jard. The simplicity hit hard. Sometimes you don't notice how tense you've been until your shoulders finally drop. Driving home, I replayed the lunch in my head like any giddy teenager, then caught myself. Were we rebounding from disaster? Trauma bonding? Maybe. But here's a truth nobody prints on inspirational posters. Healing isn't always tidy. It can start in the messy overlap between endings and beginnings, two survivors comparing scars and realizing they align. We didn't rush. Weekly lunches became bi-weekly dinners. She helped me pick a new couch that didn't hold the indent of a marriage's ghost. I helped her fix a leaky faucet in her freshly claimed house. One Saturday, we attended a minor league baseball game and spent more time teasing each other's mediocre stadium food choices than watching the score. There was no grand confession, just an easy slide from ally to maybe something more, the same way dusk fades to night before anyone turns on a light. A month later, Jard's plea deal hit local news. 5 years in federal prison, restitution north of $400,000, lifetime ban from holding fiduciary responsibility. The station used the same corporate headshot from his glory days, a cautionary icon now. I sent Denise the link with a simple game over. She replied, level cleared, ready for the next quest, and added a movie ticket emoji. We celebrated with overpriced popcorn and a superhero film whose moral boiled down to use your powers for good. Art did its usual job of mirroring life. We walked out grinning. Selena's trajectory was less cinematic. Rumor had it she'd bounced from one retail gig to another, her resume scorched by association with the fraud scandal and by gaps she couldn't explain without outing herself. One evening she texted a long apology, lines about shame, impulse, wrong crowd, and therapy. I wished her well and meant it. Forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't about letting someone back in. It's releasing their hold on the story you tell yourself before bed. Reflection pause, for you watching this unfold. Who or what do you need to forgive, not for their sake, but for your own peace? Type it out if you're comfortable. Anonymity can be a bridge to accountability. Life kept nudging forward. My firm landed the transit hub contract. I moved from calculations to site lead meetings. Denise's startup signed its third major client, an e-commerce outfit worried an ambitious CFO was cooking numbers. Some evenings she'd sit on my balcony, laptop on knees, tracing anomalies while I annotated beam diagrams beside her. We worked in companionable silence, two professionals doing what we do best, spot flaws before they grow fatal. Oddly romantic in its own nerdy way. One cool autumn night we took a walk through the arts district. Street lamps threw gold puddles across brick, and a sax busker bent notes that floated above traffic hiss. Denise hesitated at a mural of phoenix wings splashed across an old warehouse, then stepped forward and positioned her back so the painted feathers flared behind her shoulders. "Take the picture," she laughed. I did, and the camera froze her mid-smile, wings outstretched, reborn. Later, scrolling that photo alone, I realized I'd snapped my own feeling too. Rising, smudged with soot, but airborne all the same. People ask if I regret the punch in the parking lot, the public serving, the months of strategy. Maybe a better man would have sought a gentler path. But here, what experience etched deep, boundaries keep us humane. Without lines, harm sprawls unchecked. I didn't choose this war, but once it arrived, I fought with facts instead of fantasies and let the system do the heavy lifting. The clearest lesson? Inspect your structures before the storm hits. In marriage, that means conversations that sting now so they don't shatter later. In money, it means boring monthly audits. In self-respect, it means noticing the tiny elbow graze that feels wrong and trusting that instinct sooner. Let my procrastination be someone else's early alarm. A final invitation. Scroll back through your mental blueprints tonight. Where are the joints creaking? Which habits need reinforcing? Share one step you'll take. Call it your personal building code upgrade. Your comment might be the nudge another viewer needs to shore up their own foundation. 6 months to the day after the cafe meeting, Denise and I stood on a pier watching the river absorb twilight. She slipped her hand into mine without ceremony, fingers fitting like they'd always known the shape. Children chased gulls, a fairy horn moaned downstream, and for once life felt unscripted in a good way. She squeezed my hand, eyes on the water. "We should take a trip," she said. "Somewhere with no spreadsheets, no subpoenas, no cell service." "Deal," I answered, "as long as we build the itinerary on transparency and shared passwords." She laughed, real, unguarded, phoenix wing bright. I thought about the manila envelope, the credit card freezes, the courtroom echo, and how destruction had somehow cleared space for this simple moment. Turns out you can engineer a life after disaster the same way you design a bridge. Assess the load, pour new footings, trust the math, but leave room for beauty above the beams. We leaned against the railing until the river swallowed the last scrap of sun. No dramatic soundtrack played, no cinematic crane shot pulled away. It was just two people breathing the same cool air, grateful for the night they'd once feared. And I realized the real ending isn't revenge carried out or papers signed. It's the quiet certainty that you're finally standing on solid ground again, ready to build whatever comes next.